I've had the great fortune of tremendous amounts of travel, and I've relished almost every minute of it. And it's really been an entire lifetime for me. Because of my father's job, I was born and raised overseas, and every couple of years we were transferred to another country. When I came back to the States, I had this idealized version of what it would be like to come back home. And certainly America, as a leader of the free world, people were going to be very culturally savvy, very politically aware, very aware of what was going on with the United Nations, or at that time what was taking place in South Africa or in Russia. And I found when I got to the US that people were not that aware. I love sports, and the World Series was taking place, and I got all caught up in the World Series. But I kept asking people, now why is it called the World Series? I mean, only American teams participate, and a couple Canadian teams, but certainly they play baseball in all different parts of the world, and in Japan and Latin America and South America. Why is it called the World Series? And nobody could really give me an answer. And finally, a friend of mine who was also a professor said to me, "Bill, you don't really get it, do you?" And I said, "Well, evidently not." He said, "For most Americans, this is our world." This is a very disturbing statistic. In 1985, 10% of Americans reported not having anybody they could talk to about their fears, their concerns, what's going on in their life. 10% in 1985. That number in 2005 is 25%. Okay, 1 out of 4 Americans don't feel like they have anybody that they can go confide to, somebody they can trust, somebody they can be vulnerable with. Look at that. 3% of Americans are leading a healthy lifestyle. 3% of us. If you really want to take life in the shape of a pie, and if you think about this, let's say the pie is a 24-hour clock. The Dutch have the most balanced lives. I mean, a certain percentage of the pie is for family, a certain percentage of the pie is for work. The Dutch only work a 35-hour work week. A certain percentage of the pie is for hobbies. Another percentage of the pie is for continuing education. And so it's all very balanced, which is why the Dutch sort of do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. They don't have to carve out time to go to the gym because the Dutch bike everywhere. There are more bicycles in Holland than there are people. The Dutch ranked as the most content culture. Look, our suppliers, our employees, our colleagues, our friends, our neighbors are just increasingly more and more diverse. I mean, all this information will really come in handy in terms of understanding other people. I was invited to speak at Shanghai Normal University in Shanghai, and I combined that. I was also invited to be a speaker at a conference in Hong Kong. So I combined the two together. And when I got to Shanghai, it was a flurry of activity. It was a 2-day trip. I did a couple presentations at the university. I met with the dean. There was a banquet for me that evening. And I counted over 30 different potential gaffes or errors that I could have made that would have been insulting. So we talk about Asians, we talk about Latins, but what does that mean? I mean, if we talk about an Asian group, aren't the Filipinos quite different than the Koreans, quite different than Japanese, et cetera? When I think of your organization and 50% of your business is international, and if you want to look ahead 10 years, 15 years, and this is your career, and this is the company you want to be with, perhaps you'll be 4 or 5 times the size you are now. And what is that going to mean for you? And what is that going to mean for your organization? And how can you help the organization grow? How can you help the organization thrive? When I do this presentation for huge multinational corporations, I did this presentation for a large bank that had divisions all over the world. And my question to them, and my challenge was, are you a US company with international divisions, or are you really a global entity? I mean, you have all these employees that are in different parts of the world. Are you valuing their input? Are you asking them what they think? Are you really looking for global best practices? Are you looking for the best way to do things? And if you're not, maybe you need to get a leg up on your competition and start thinking about how you can do that. And that's what this program is really all about, how you can include everybody and how you can make that work and how you can really have your company grow. The reality is that the whole world is becoming more interactive. There's only a limited amount of business in the US. We have to start thinking globally if we're going to continue to be profitable. What happens when you bring together individuals from different parts of the globe for a cross-cultural project? One executive was talking about how he didn't really know what to do. He has this whole group around the world that he's responsible for. And he wants to get global best practices for his accounting department. And he wants to standardize it all around the world. And he wants to go ahead and get their input. So he asked the American individual, what do you think? How long will it take us to go ahead and kick out this project? Oh, 3 weeks. It'll take us 3 weeks. Because in America,
We keep moving. It doesn't matter if you make the wrong decision in the US, in our corporate world. The worst thing you can do is not make any decision. We're very forgiving as a culture if we make a mistake. Oh, that's okay, we tried it, it didn't work. Let's go ahead and regroup and try something else. But for example, in other cultures, that's not the way they do things. If you ask the Indian representative, how long will it take to do this project? 3 months. Because in India, one of the worst things you can ever do is make a mistake. Now you ask the Japanese representative, how long will it take us to do this project? Oh, depends how long it takes us to establish a relationship. Because in Japan, the relationship is the prime motivator. You have to have a solid relationship. You just can't do business with a Japanese individual. They have to trust you. They have to like you. It takes several visits generally to go ahead and get any kind of a deal going. So this executive is all perplexed. Has no idea how long it's going to take, doesn't know exactly what to do, and really has this international group, but is very American in the way he thinks. So his thoughts about let's just get a couple focus groups together, we'll go ahead and trade some ideas and get this all hammered out, that doesn't work. And I'll show you why it doesn't work.
I'd like to talk today about cultural empathy. And I realize this is a corporate audience, so I'm going to go ahead and use an example from that world. I had a gentleman who contacted me who runs a small tech company. He loves hiring Chinese employees. He finds them to be incredibly dedicated, very proficient, and always willing to jump in and do whatever needs to be done, not necessarily if it's right within their job description. So he has this large group of Chinese employees that he's very, very happy with, but he doesn't really feel like he personally connects with them. So he calls me to say, can you enlighten me? I'm not that familiar with the culture. What can you tell me? So I kept it to a business sense, and I talked about perceptions of hierarchy, and I talked about direct versus indirect communication styles and how to overcome language issues, et cetera, et cetera. And I felt like he really understood that on a cognitive level. And that afternoon, ironically enough, a Chinese woman that was probably about 25, one of the employees came in, and she was having a conversation with him, and she became very nervous. And she became her entire demeanor, she started to speak very, very quickly. And she kept saying, I'm so sorry for my English, I'm so sorry for my English. And they just obviously miscommunicated. And a few minutes later, after she left, he said, so what do I do with that? Although we may have global divisions in corporations, we maybe have worldwide services, how global are we? How culturally savvy are we? We can put a nameplate up, but how far down the experience curve are we today? And I guarantee you, by the time you leave today, you'll be much farther down the experience curve than when you came in. Everyone's going to have something to take away from here.